All right, everyone. Let's wait 1 or 2 more minutes and then we'll get started. All right, let's jump in. Um, good evening, everyone. Or morning, everyone. Um, Welcome to the last day of the AI crash course. Hope you all enjoyed it so far. Hope you all learned some stuff. Have been able to play with some code and be able to sort of take the stuff that we learned and be able to hopefully apply it in the future and sort of take that knowledge further. People who have attended sort of the 80% of the courses will receive a certificate, as well as some sort of virtual swag that Facebook has provided. And you can sort of add it as your screensaver on your phones or on your laptops for people who so to incline. And I'll also share some sort of follow-up materials that people who are interested in getting more exposed to the field can sort of follow up on. Today will just be all about doing some really amazing Q&As with some amazing either Trinidadians or those involved in doing some amazing stuff in Trinidad. We have an incredible lineup of speakers, and I am excited to start off today with Jason Pinto. He is the COO of Pace, a exciting startup in the UK, and they're using AI to do a bunch of cool stuff, but that is not for me to tell you. I'll leave it to Jason to sort of give you all of the details. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, Mandela. Thanks much, man.
Thanks for being here.
No worries. First off, thank you for invitation, and again, congrats, man. Amazing to have over 100 people attending, and I joined for one of the previous days, and really great stuff you're sharing, man. So you're doing great work, and really pleased to be a little part of this.
Sweet, thank you so much. So how about starting about giving sort of like your background, where you grew up in Trinidad, sort of education, and then how you got into this field?
Happy to. So let's see, where do I start? I'm actually shock horror Jamaican. So I was actually born in Jamaica. Don't hold it against me, but I grew up in Trinidad. So Trinidad is actually home, and that's where my family is still, and so forth. Went to CIC, and then fell in love with math, physics, chemistry, computers, just the full gamut of tech and science when I was there. Just had some great teachers and also just other great students around me, some of whom have gone on to do quite amazing things, actually, that inspired me to, work hard and read widely about all these amazing topics. And from there, I was lucky enough to go to the US to do my undergrad. So I did my undergrad at MIT in material science, which was a kind of a godsend for me because I was sort of interested in physics and math and chemistry and some engineering, and found this degree that kind of unified all those things. So I really enjoyed that. And from there, went out to the West Coast for a bit at Stanford, then came to a startup technology company, which is really where my journey takes a really important step, in that I joined a startup technology company in the US called E-Ink. That was an MIT spinout, and really fell in love with startups. And that's really what my little 5 minutes of talk and slides are really going to focus on. Mandela's done amazing stuff to share with you, a lot about the math and computer science behind machine learning. I'm going to talk more about really what my company does, and a little bit about our little entrepreneurial journey. But my own journey started when I joined E-Ink after I did my master's. Then came over to the UK, so across the pond. I kind of had my share of the US. So came over here to the UK, went to graduate school. So I actually have a degree, a PhD in physics. And again, that was, what I describe it. I mean, when you get to graduate school, in some ways, the department is, certainly in the UK, kind of an interesting choice in that you get people doing a huge variety of sort of cross-functional science in these groups. So my group had people doing theory, computer modeling, chemistry, physics, you name it. So that was really fun exercise. Then I left that and actually joined an investment firm. So I invested in tech companies for a bunch of years, which was another fun ride. And then it landed me where I am today, which is co-founding this company called Pace that I'll tell you guys a little bit more about. So that's me.
Sweet. So you want to sort of share your sort of slides to give people some context?
Yep, sure. I'll put that up.
Let me update. Perfect. You should be able to do it now. Yep.
Super. Okay, hopefully you all can see that.
Yep.
Great. So as I said, Mandela's done an amazing job. He's done sharing with you guys some of the CS behind this. So this is going to be a presentation with no equations and no code. So a little bit of a change here, but there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that, as I figured you guys would probably have had enough of this by now. And more importantly, my role, as I was telling someone, I haven't written a line of code in Anger in years because I've really spent most of my time putting a team together, getting everyone aligned on a mission, and plotting a path forward with product and so forth. So what we do is dynamic pricing, and in particular with online learning. And I'll tell you guys a little bit more about that and why that's important. So taking one particular example, which is the hospitality space. So most of you have probably had the experience of going to booking.com or Expedia and booking a hotel room. And the interesting thing is that those businesses like Expedia and Booking are intermediaries in a market. So on the left-hand side of that market are us, the punters, looking for a hotel room. And on the right-hand side are the hoteliers. So the hundreds of thousands of hotel groups that are on those platforms. And so these intermediaries basically are presenting these items for sale, i.e. hotel rooms, to the people trying to book a hotel room on the right, yeah? But there's a really important question for all of these people trying to sell hotel rooms. And by the way, this is a gigantic market. So sort of $500 billion of transactions are done every year globally across these markets. It's really a gigantic market. And kind of a really important question underlies this transaction, which is what price should I set for this hotel room? So a little bit of economics 101 here. And one other thing I'll point out in that we are trying to solve a sort of big engineering problem, and you'll see that we borrow liberally from all kinds of different fields. So you'll hear me talk as much about economics as I will about computer science and mathematical optimization and so forth here. So the Econ 101 is basically one of the kind of key principles underlying essentially all transactions where there's a buyer and a seller is this supply-demand matching. So you basically have supply that changes price based on the quantity available. And you have demand that is, of course, affected by that price. Yeah. So generally, the higher the price, the lower the demand. Anyway, so the interesting thing is that where those two lines cross is what you have as an equilibrium point, right? Where the supply and demand are matching. And the interesting thing is that we actually don't know the shape of that demand curve. So I've plotted a curve here. It could be a straight line. We don't know the slope of it, etc. So that's one thing that really is a kind of a puzzle for anyone involved in an economic transaction. And I see actually I've made a sort of small error here. I think I've mislabeled that. The demand should actually fall as the price grows. But I'll fix that later. But the important bit is that where those lines cross, you have this kind of equilibrium supply-demand match here. So where that boils down to a sort of particular set of transactions, and we use the example of a kind of someone trying to sell a bunch of hotel rooms. is that any person who's a buyer in a transaction has this hidden variable in their head called willingness to pay. So it's quite a simple concept, actually. It's basically the price at which you would transact. So if an item is for sale below that price, you would transact and buy that item. If an item is for sale above that price, you wouldn't transact because you'd basically think that item is too expensive for me, right? So it is a mismatch between what I'm willing to pay and what is being sold for. So what actually happens in reality is that if you have a particular hotel room night available, so let's say, the 23rd of December, we have available for sale 100 rooms. From now, people can book for that room night, yeah, because you're basically booking in advance of the room night that you're paying for. And you have basically all of these customers arriving with different willingness to pay. The problem is you as a seller of the hotel rooms don't know what that is. So naively, you basically put a static price, one price through that whole unknown smattering of arriving guests, and you basically capture the consumers who have a willingness to pay that is higher than that price. Now, the problem is that anyone who has a willingness to pay below that price won't transact because they think that that price is too expensive. But the other interesting thing is that anyone who has a willingness to pay above that line actually would be willing to pay more for that room or willing to pay more for that item, but you've undercharged those people for basically what you're selling. So static pricing basically is very simple, and it's what you do when you don't have any information, but it massively under optimizes for what you're trying to sell here. And importantly, if you go to any market where there's someone selling fruit or vegetables directly, they actually take this willingness to pay concept to heart and will change the price based on the time of day, when they want to go home, right? Because they want to sell all their bananas before they want to go home. So the price is going to drop when it's, right? So they have all these concepts actually that they intuitively understand and manage, but formalized retail, like if you go into a supermarket, they put one label, one price on the thing, and basically remove all of that information from the system, right? So that's a kind of one thing that we always have to be guessing at as a seller of hotel rooms or any item for that matter. And then the analogy I draw here with all of that underlying principle is that if you're trying to sell an item where your buyer has basically this willingness to pay variable and you're trying to do the supply demand matching, it essentially is like a game of skill and chance. So folks like Mandela and the folks at Google as well have been spending a lot of time looking at basically using machine learning to win games. So probably all of you have seen this amazing triumph of Google besting the best Go player in the world. And many, many, many years before that, IBM beat Garry Kasparov at chess. And the reason that people do that is that these types of games are basically purely skill-based games, yeah? So it really is down to the skill of the other player. There's not an element of chance in that game, yeah? So, and those games are well-defined. You can basically determine a winner. The rules are very, very narrow and well-defined here. What we're playing in this environment is actually a more complex game in that there's a huge element of chance as well. And in that regard, it's more similar to a game like poker, where there's an element of skill. So you're playing against somebody, but you actually don't know what cards are going to be dealt the next time a card is dealt or a card is turned over. So there's an element of chance that actually makes life more complicated if you're trying to essentially create an agent that can play a game against a human. So that makes our lives basically playing this game where we're trying to optimize price more complicated, because we have all these hidden variables, but we also have this element of chance inserted into the process as well. So it makes it more complicated, but I guess more fun in that regard. But invariably, what practitioners, people who are actually trying to do stuff, resort to is Excel. So the $500 billion of hotel transactions done in the world, well over half of them are intermediated by somebody with an Excel spreadsheet trying to make sense of this craziness. So they're basically sitting and looking at the basically history of transactions that they've done for these types of rooms. So they may have, a few different room categories in their hotel, and they're looking at the history of how those rooms have sold. They're looking at, weekday, weeknight trends. It's horribly complicated, and they're trying to hack that with an Excel sheet. And by the way, if they're really good, they're looking at that Excel sheet once a week and updating it with new data. Yeah, so they have a bunch of priors that they're updating with new data, maybe once a week if they're real good. Okay, so that's ridiculous if you think about it, because this is, as I said, this kind of crazy complicated problem, right? In that if you even take a very simplistic small hotel, right, where you have 30 rooms in each of 5 categories, right? So you have 150 rooms spread out across these 5 categories. And then invariably, you need to be able to set a price for every day or booking night for a full year in advance of when you're looking, because people need to be able to book nights well in advance of today, basically, when you're looking. So what that means basically is that each time you try to make a decision about price changes, you're trying to change close to 2,000 prices. Okay. And as I said, like if you're good, i.e. a good human, most people are doing that maybe once a week because the thing is too complicated to do more often. Yeah. And you're making a huge amount of what are simplifying assumptions, right? Because you're doing things like just trying to maximize your occupancy and so forth, rather than maximize your revenue, which is really what you should be doing. So it's done badly by humans is the important thing. And another important bit is that this is a probabilistic problem, right? And humans are actually particularly bad at evaluating probabilistic problems. It's just because of the way we're wired. We're not so great at it. So enter pace. So this is where we come in. So the we here are the sort of 3 musketeers here. So these are the 3 founders. So myself and my 2 co-founders. I already blabbed on about myself, but the 2 other guys that founded this, Jens, who's the CEO, a friend of mine for years now. He was at Google for a number of years, and then at a company called iZettle, where he led strategy. And then the big brain behind the operation, another Jamaican. This one is a proper Jamaican. So a guy named John Paul Clark. So yeah, big up to another Caribbean fella doing great stuff. So he's a professor at Georgia Tech. He went to undergrad with me. So we've known each other for an embarrassingly long amount of time. And he's a professor of operations research. So basically OR is essentially a bunch of applied mathematicians who started generally in the airline industry, actually. So his degrees have generally been in aerospace, because that's where OR was really pioneered. And they tend to specialize in mathematical optimization. So finding optimal solutions to math problems. Yeah. So they do things like route planning for planes and sort of staff and crew management and so forth. And these actually tend to fall into these kind of problems that in some cases are NP problems, so they can't be solved in polynomial time, which I don't know if Mandela you mentioned at all, but it's another huge class of complex systems, which is a kind of a super interesting area of mathematics. That's a ton is being done in right now and intersects a bit with machine learning as well. Anyway, those guys tend to handle those kinds of problems, and they're borrowing a lot from machine learning these days. And there are a lot of interesting companies and groups doing things at the intersection between OR and mathematical optimization and machine learning. Yeah. So anyway, that's his area of expertise, and why he was the sort of perfect person to come found this company with us. Yeah. So the interesting thing is that the strategy we've taken is what is called online learning. So we and everyone in the space will create a demand model, which is essentially a model that tries to describe how demand changes with price. So hours of lecturing could be done just about that box there, which is demand model, but suffice it to say, a lot of intellectual property is thrown into creating a demand model. Then those demand models are exposed to the agents, i.e. human beings, us buying, and pricing decisions are made based on well, the pricing decision is made by our engine, and then human beings interact with those pricing decisions and either make a sale or don't, yeah? So hence you get this series of sales data. And traditionally, that process has flown only in one direction. And the reason is basically down to all the stuff that basically prevented AI from becoming a huge thing many decades ago, which is we didn't have the compute power, we didn't have the sort of vast quantities of data that we now have access to. And again, there was this also the third bit, which is this sort of algorithmic revolution that happened in AI. And the same thing was present in this space. So basically, people ran these processes in one direction. And what now we're able to do is actually close the loop. So what we do actually with online learning is that we actually interrogate data that's arriving in a sequence or a time series. And so booking data, like the one that I've described for hotels, airlines, trains, planes, etc., follows that pattern. So it's a sequential series of data. And every time we interrogate a new data point, we reevaluate whether the demand model actually is a good representation of reality, i.e. how demand changes with price, and we recalculate this loop, yeah? So basically the model updates with each step in the series. And that's really something that's only been able to be done because of kind of this massive compute power on demand and the availability of things like Amazon Web Services and Google Compute Platform and so forth. So we've applied that online learning technique to this this problem of hospitality pricing. Yeah. And as I said, we borrowed a lot. So reinforcement learning is something that you all are very familiar with now, thanks to the efforts of Mandela and probably your own work. But as I mentioned, mathematical optimization, which is a huge space of its own, where you have some linear programming and so forth. We borrowed some from there. And then we are building, so not yet done, but we're building an agent-based simulation engine to allow us to iterate these models quickly so that we can basically run optimizations and run improvements in accelerated time. We don't have to wait for basically months of bookings to come in. We can basically run this in a simulated environment. And then as well, we've borrowed some from game theory because as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of analogs in how you play games with how basically this process of buying and selling is done, and control theory as well, all built into this demand model or pricing engine. And that pricing engine is then instantiated in code. So we have great software engineers alongside our scientists who've put this thing into a micro-architected system that runs efficiently on the Google Compute Cloud. And hence we're able to do this kind of recalculation frequently and efficiently. And then just a final couple of screenshots. So once we've put that in code, then you wrap that whole thing in a software system and sell that software system to a customer. So the customer actually interfaces with this using a web application. So much like Gmail or Dropbox or any other web application you generally log into. Our customers log in to our web application and see the sort of decisions that the system is doing in the background. Yeah. And then finally, where the rubber meets the road is basically price updates. So instead of having this sort of flat static pricing, you can see, and this is pulled out from real data, so you can see basically this this change in price as basically demand changes for this particular hotel room over the course of sort of this 3-month booking window. So basically the system is making constant changes to this price every hour, in fact, and reevaluating whether that change in price has had a positive impact on revenue or not. So it really is important that it runs efficiently. So again, this marriage of this machine learning and optimization with a really important set of computer science to make the thing run efficiently in the cloud. So that's it basically. And what that means basically is that we get this kind of conversion from this kind of static price path to something that looks more optimal through that thicket of points, and ultimately ends us with revenue maximization. And I'm going to end with basically the face to the people who actually did the work. So we have this amazing science team of guys with degrees in physics and math and so forth who have done all the work that I've been lucky enough to talk about. And that's it. So that's me, and that's a little bit about Pace.
Sweet. That was really fascinating, Jason. Since we're running a little bit on time, I'll ask you one or two questions, and then you can probably follow up in the questions over chat to the people
Yep.
who are pretty excited about what you're up to. So I think one of the interesting questions was, how do customers perceive this dynamic pricing? So like, for example, if you're paying one price at 8 a.m. and they check back at 2 p.m., it's a different price. How do you deal with sort of like that sort of customer?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
luckily, at least for the hospitality space and airlines and so forth, people are used to these changing prices. There are other industries where people hate that, right? But at least in this industry in particular, there's been essentially many decades of prices being changed, albeit with Excel spreadsheets. So the consumer has been basically primed to view this as a reality.
got you. And then one more question, before you sort of go, how does productioning the model looks like? How do you roll out the model? Do you have to sort of, you have specialized models for different companies? How do you
No.
factor in these sort of live updates, etc.?
Yeah. We don't have specialists, so we have one model basically, but it has an ensemble of strategies, is what I'd say. So that, as I said, we borrow liberally, but that ends up with this kind of, and that's the reality of a lot of model building in finance as well and so forth. You have an ensemble of strategies, and there's an important kind of decision engine in the middle that looks at the sort of behavior of the system and decides what strategies to apply, if that makes sense. So we are very focused on building one robust, scalable thing to apply to this whole industry, but it has many different attributes.
Sweet. And any sort of parting words, and then if you have some time, you can also follow up with some quite a bit
Yeah,
of questions on the
yeah. I'll look
over
at the
over.
questions and so forth. I have to jump to another call too, so I'll be there and I'll be back in a little bit. But parting words: find super smart people. Make sure that you're in an environment where you're the dumbest one in the room. So I want to go and work with people who are smarter than me and pull my game up. So challenge yourself, work hard, and have fun, because this is what it's all about.
Sweet. Thanks so much, Jason. We really appreciate you
Cool.
taking the time. This
No
was
worries, my
really
man.
fascinating.
No worries.
Thanks so
So as
much.
I said, I need to duck out and make another call, but I'll be back and see if I can address some of the questions and so forth.
Sweet. Sounds good, Jason.
Take care,
Have a good
man.
one. All
Thanks,
right.
Mandela.
Bye.
Yes, man. Bye.
So now I'm excited to welcome VJ. So I met VJ at Tech Beach a couple years ago, which is this Caribbean tech conference organized by some of my friends such as Kyle. Uh, VJ is originally from the US. Did his undergrad at Stanford and is now actually running a robotics company in Trinidad and Tobago that is doing some really exciting stuff. And I would leave him to share more about what he's up to. Welcome, VJ.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Mandela. I don't have any slides here, so I'll just kind of share a little bit more. I'm happy to make this a little bit more of a discussion as well, Q&A, whatever you think makes the most sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, to start here, as Mandela mentioned, I'm from the US originally. I studied at Stanford, undergrad and master's there, and worked at a couple different startups out in the Silicon Valley, San Francisco Bay Area. Ended up selling my previous robotic startup to Google, and I was a engineering lead in one of the groups there, working mostly on virtual reality, augmented reality, things like that. And more recently, about 3 years ago, through my wife, who's Trinidadian, I got to learn a little bit more about Trinidad and Tobago. Got to visit a bunch of times, meet a lot of people involved in tech, academia, engineering, computer science, all these different areas. And I decided, I realized that there's a lot of people out here in the Caribbean that are super excited about tech, want to be doing things on the cutting edge of what's happening in some of these fields. And there aren't necessarily that many opportunities locally in the Caribbean to participate in this ecosystem. So I ended up starting Vertana, which is actually a robotics software development and outsourcing company, which is based in Trinidad in St. Augustine. And what we do is we work with Silicon Valley and really global robotics and tech companies and use local talent from the Caribbean to develop algorithms, develop software, and other types of systems for customers trying to build new types of robots. So that's mostly it in a nutshell. And yeah, I guess I'm not sure which direction to take this.
Yeah,
Mandela.
I think so. I think I will start with a couple of questions and then I'll open it up to the audience. I think people probably would be interested in sort of the intersection of both AI and robotics. What is sort of the differences? How do they sort of interplay with each other? And where do you see the future of robotics going, and how can the sort of Caribbean play a part in that future?
Sure. So there's a lot in there. Let's see how much of it we get through. So when we talk about robotics and AI, I often tell people that we're doing robotics and they're like, cool, so you must be developing AI algorithms all the time. And it's like, well, sort of, yes and no. I think it's important to remember that in any robotic system, maybe breaking it down, you can look at various blog posts and things that talk about like, what is a robot? And generally I think of it as a system that can sense something in the environment, make a plan, and then act on that plan. So it's sort of some core tenets around robotics. And that means that, well, if you need to like make a plan of what you're gonna do in the world, AI is a really great tool for that. But there's a lot more that goes into robotics. You need to figure out how to get data from cameras, how to synchronize that with the rest of the system. So maybe thinking about a specific application. If, let's say that I want a robot that's going to sit on a production line that needs to pick things off of a conveyor belt and then sort them into different bins, depending on what's coming out of that conveyor belt. And I think in one of the sessions, you may have talked a little bit about computer vision and AI and convolutional neural networks. So a camera, like you get data from a camera and you can use those neural networks to classify what these different objects are that you're seeing. But once you see it, you need to do something with it. And that requires a whole nother suite of code and algorithms and things that may use some AI, but maybe not. And that can involve things like motion planning, so figuring out how to build paths for that robot arm, designing motor controllers and control loops for those motors that are going to be moving the robot, and then even synchronizing with maybe other infrastructure systems, so like updating inventory systems as you pick these things up to hook up with other infrastructure that's going on in the factory. So AI is awesome, and it's really important for a lot of the types of robotics applications that we work on, but it's not the be all and end all of everything that we do. And many times a lot of the work we do is sort of building the infrastructure and systems that help enable specific AI algorithms to actually do real stuff in the real world. Sorry.
Sweet, thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So I'm gonna start going through some questions from the audience. People are obviously excited about what you're doing at Vertana. And they're curious about, are there opportunities for internships, for example, available, or what sort of opportunities are available at Vertana at the moment?
So I'd be happy to share a little bit about that. So we definitely have internship programs at Vertana. We actually had 5 interns this past summer, which was great. We generally are looking for students that are about to start their last year of their degree. So that would mean about to start their last degree, about to start their last year of undergrad, or about to start their last year of master's, or their last year of their PhD. The reason for that is that we're looking for students who can come in, kind of understand the Vertana culture, how we do things, the types of problems we work on, take that experience, go back to the university and use that context as they round out the rest of their degree, with the fingers crossed, hopefully you'll come back and work with us full-time after you finish your degree, if we've convinced you that what we're doing is exciting enough. And it's generally people that have a strong programming background, algorithmic background. And we don't even expect people to have a background in robotics. That is something that we understand you may not get that experience in university, but we're happy to teach you based on the fundamentals of software and programming and those types of things.
Got you. People are also curious about sort of how do you go about like sourcing clients? Are most of your clients locally, regionally, global? And what does that sort of client sourcing process look like? And is it difficult having global clients, especially being in Trinidad?
That's a really good question. Primarily, we have been focusing on a client base that is outside of the Caribbean. So it's primarily been in Silicon Valley, the San Francisco Bay Area. The reason for that is that we are looking for customers that are, so our customers are generally not, they're not people trying to use robots. Our customers are people that are trying to build new types of robots. And that often, there isn't that much of a market yet for that type of expertise those customers don't exist that much in the Caribbean, at least as far as we're aware. So those types of customers tend to be more in sort of the core tech hubs, you would say, in the world. So places like San Francisco, for instance, San Francisco, Boston, Munich, Tokyo, a lot of these places that are really building these new types of robotic systems. But moving forward, we definitely would be excited to be doing more with Caribbean-based customers. It's just we haven't found the right fit of customer yet. And I would love to talk to local industry and see if we can find a way that we can work together, but we're not there yet, I would say.
Gotcha. And then is it difficult, working with global clients? Like, do you have to sort of like fly robots to SF, or like do you mostly work on the sort of software level so you don't have the sort of hardware constraints of being miles away from, Yeah,
so we've done a lot of our work is software based and it's on physical robots. So VPNs, like virtual private networks, are a really magical thing. You're able to we spent a lot of time, we've logged into a drone sitting in a warehouse in one of our client sites in California. And when I say drone, I mean, this is a drone that's bigger than a car, and running software and control software on that drone itself. So we're able to do that type of remote work because it is software based. We've also had customers that ship us hardware. So even though we're not building the hardware, we have the hardware sitting on our desk that we can then develop on, load software, do things like that. The other thing to mention is given 2020 as a year and how crazy of a year it's been, in some ways, a lot of our customers have been forced to think about how to do work remotely. So our customers, even though they're in San Francisco, all of their employees are sitting in their own homes, in their own home offices doing work. So in some ways, 2020 has leveled the playing field for companies like us because everybody is remote. So even us being in Trandad makes it much more palatable for our customers. And in terms of sourcing these customers, it takes a little bit of salesmanship to convince them that, hey, we are remote. So I guess 2020 has made it easier, but prior to that, just explaining that we were always available, we're in almost the same time zone. Our teams are responsive. We have email, we have video chat. We actually have set up systems where we actually have continuous video chat with some of our customers. So they can just be like, hey, Vijay, this thing's broken. Can you help us with it? It's like, sure, no problem. It's like walking to someone's desk. So the internet has made things really easy these days.
Wow. Thanks so much for sharing. So people are curious about sort of your experience working in robotics versus, say, previously doing AR, VR. And what are your thoughts on sort of the differences, which one is more exciting to you, and sort of future applications of both?
Sure. I think one thing that's really interesting in AR and VR is the underlying technologies that make that industry, or that make those applications possible, is very similar to robotics. So if people have tried a HTC Vive or a Windows mixed reality headset or an Oculus headset, there's a lot of underlying estimation for understanding how your head is moving, where your head is going to move, and kind of and in real time rendering new data or figuring out what's happening. And a lot of that technology is borrowed from drones and advanced drone technology that's been around for a long time. And it's now productizing it for AR and VR. So when you look at the back end, we'll say, for a robot, for many robot applications or drones versus AR, VR, it's actually very similar. And I think there's actually a lot where you can merge these two applications where you think about installing a new robot in a factory. You need to tell the robot, hey, I want to pick up things from this specific conveyor belt, or I want to pick up things off of a certain shelf, or I want to weld this specific line on a car body. And that takes a lot of work. And there's a technician dialing in all these parameters, all these constants. And if you had a virtual reality headset or an augmented reality headset where you could just point to what you need the robot to do, then the robot can understand that. You can demonstrate that to the robot, and then some AI understands that demonstration and then figures out what to do with that robot. So there's a lot of overlap here in where these different fields are going, which I think is pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. People are curious about, do you have, is there opportunity to sort of see, do you want to have site visits at Vectano to see sort of these robots live, or is that possible? People are excited about the sort of robotics. They want to sort of see how it looks live.
That's a good question. Well, 2020 makes everything hard. In general, though, when people have asked about visiting our office, I have to warn them because in our office, all you see is a room with a bunch of keyboards and a bunch of monitors and desks with maybe some widgets here and there because so much of what we do is remote. And unfortunately, I can't always show you what's on the screens and what's on the remote sites because we are doing a lot of client work. And that means that unfortunately, we are under NDA, we're under confidentiality agreements with a lot of these people. So there's not that much to show. I'm hoping, I'm constantly trying to convince a lot of our customers to let us show more about what's going on because I think it would be a really exciting recruitment tool to get more people applying for jobs. By the way, we're hiring, we're always hiring. We're looking for more people. It is, but the types of things we're doing, it's all over the place. Like we're doing some stuff with drone, like autopilots for drones, algorithms for robots in factories, simulations of all these different types of systems. We're also doing some AI related work with IoT devices that could go in industrial environments. We've done some work with automating construction equipment. So excavators, bulldozers, backhoes, that type of equipment to automate how construction is done. It's sort of all over the place. And if you come to our office, you're not gonna see an excavator. That's sitting somewhere else very far away in its own sort of sandboxed area. Yeah.
Wow, thanks for sharing. People are also curious. So you started a company in Silicon Valley, you got it sold to Google. You've now started a company in Trinidad. How would you sort of describe sort of like business, startup, entrepreneurship environment in Trinidad compared to say the Valley, and what are sort of the challenges / maybe benefits of starting a company in Trinidad versus say Silicon Valley?
Yeah, so I think the place I would start is talking about it as an entire country or a population, or when looking at people in tech, like if you think about excitement, like you look at the excitement levels in Silicon Valley and the excitement levels in Trinidad or the Caribbean, and it's the same. People are super, super excited about doing things in tech here in Trinidad, which is awesome. Like, so you see that passion, you see that excitement. And I think where things start getting a little trickier is it's like, hey, I'm super, super excited. I want to do something amazing. Now what? And I think the ecosystem in Trinidad is growing and there's people that are doing things in tech in Trinidad, but sort of there's less guidance and there's less opportunities and there's less examples really of people building these types of companies, building this type of ecosystem, which often, if someone is super excited about doing something in AI or robotics, that's awesome if you can start your own company and I want to help you do that. But sometimes for people, the next step might just be wanting to work in that field locally. And local industry doesn't always provide as many opportunities for that type of thing. And we're trying to fix that. We're trying to fix that. We're trying to give people those opportunities where they can see how like a top tier technology development is done, see how the rest of the world does it. And if someone's working in Vertana and they're super excited and they really want to do something in tech in the Caribbean, in robotics in the Caribbean, I would be excited for them to hand in their resignation letter, start their own company and do it in Trinidad. And that'll help build out this ecosystem. So I think it's really about ecosystem building and getting people excited about doing stuff in the Caribbean and giving people the confidence to actually build those ecosystems help build that ecosystem in Trinidad, even if it's at the early stage. I'd say it's trending up and we just need to keep investing in it.
Sweet, thank you so much for sharing. I think I'm also curious about sort of you also do, people might be familiar, but you also do some angel investing. How can you give some idea like what that angel investing is and sort of how do you go about finding interesting companies to invest in and how do you sort of make a decision point on whether to invest or not?
Sure. So most of my angel investing has been focused on the robotic space because that's a space that I've been working in and familiar with for more than a decade. In terms of looking for companies to invest in, it often ends up being through personal networks, personal connections, and sort of I look at people that I trust, people whose judgment that I trust, people that I know, and those people may know other people that may be building companies that they trust as well. It is a trust-based ecosystem, unfortunately. But the reason for that is that there are a lot of immeasurables that come with trying to build a company. sort of understanding the team. There's both understanding the value proposition, what the business is going to do, and also understanding the team, and as they hit adversity, how are they going to overcome that adversity? How are they going to change the business that they're building? And I think it's important for everyone who's interested in sort of maybe starting a company is just talk to as many people as possible. If you know someone that is doing something, or know someone that's built a company, or know someone that's involved, that has maybe gotten funding before, talk to them, understanding what that process looked like. Reach out to me. I can share my LinkedIn or other contact information as well. And I think people often think about trying to get funding for their company as, oh, there's no venture capital in Trinidad and Tobago. I would actually say that's a little bit of a yes and no, in that I think there's this expectation that, oh, there's no money, I can't get my company invested, I can't actually start this company. And it's a little bit of give and take, and there's a blended, there's a spectrum here where there's a lot that people can do in starting their company, which doesn't necessarily require funding. And it could mean doing nights and weekends, bootstrapping it as you go, just kind of figure out how to make ends meet and do stuff, have a full-time job and do something on the side. Try to build something that is going to solve a big problem. And I think if you can show that you've made headway or built something or a prototype of something that has a big impact beyond just what's happening in Trinidad, and you can sell something that has global impact, I think doors will start opening for you in terms of angel investing, maybe with angel investors in Trinidad, but also in Silicon Valley or other places, if you can show that you're targeting a global market.
Sweet. And then I think people really want some advice about how do you, like, you say Form 5 student, and if you're familiar with the Trinidad education system, Form 5 A-level student, you say maybe thinking about getting into university, how do you sort of like prepare yourself? Any advice about getting into robotics, the skills that are necessary, maybe how, like, thinking about projects, experience, and those sort of stuff?
Yeah, so I'm new to understanding the Trinidad educational system, but I've gotten some exposure over the years, over the past couple of years, and I generally feel that the system starts funneling people into very specific disciplines fairly early on in their education path. And my biggest advice would be do whatever you can. So of course you have to pick some specific path, but do whatever you can to get a multidisciplinary experience as you go. Learn as much as you can outside of that specific pathway that you've chosen. So if you've chosen, let's say you're excited about robotics and you've chosen computer science, do everything you can to learn about the mechanical side of things, the electrical side of things, the ethics side of things, other areas that are not in your specific area, because as this field continues to evolve, all of the hard problems that we're going to solve are going to be multidisciplinary. And to really keep attacking this area and like solve the big, hairy problems, it's not about being an expert in this one thing that you've been studying for the past 15 years. It's about bringing in multiple areas and doing something interesting and creative with it.
Sweet. And then any sort of like parting, we got to move on a little bit. And you can sort of maybe a couple of questions I think in the chat that you can probably address over text when you're finished. But any sort of parting words to the audience who they really enjoyed sort of speaking with you today.
Yeah, I would say if this is an area you're excited about, find projects that you're passionate about. There's a lot of resources on the internet. Find tutorials, find projects, do AI crash courses if you're excited about AI. Just do whatever you can beyond your degree or beyond your normal coursework to get as much information as you can. The world is changing. There's a lot more that you can learn than just the degree and just your exams. There's so much more out there, and everything will continue to change. So yeah, find a project you're passionate about and do whatever you can to deliver on that project and do something cool, even if it's outside of the area that you're excited about. Mandela, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I'm happy to try to answer questions in the chat as they come up. So.
Sweet. Thanks so much, Vijay. We really appreciate it for sure. Sweet. So now I'm excited to introduce one of my good friends, Mark. He is a data science manager at LucidWorks that is using AI to sort of automate search. And he has a very exciting presentation plan for you all and some great advice. So I'm excited to have him here today. And welcome,
All
Mark.
right. Good day, everyone. Mark Moyu here. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. I'm going to get into it. I promise to obey the time constraints that we have, right?
Probably give them also a little background about yourself as well, where you grew
Yeah.
up in Trinidad, to set some context.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
All right. So let's hit the first slide then. What I'd like you to take away from this talk, I'm going to give you a background on myself, is maybe if you're not as motivated as Mandela, how you can still get, a really good life in machine learning and data science. I didn't necessarily start out on the road that he did, so I'm here to present that story to you. I grew up in Trinidad and Tobago. I left there when I was 18 in 2006 to study chemical engineering, finished that in 2010. I went to St. Mary's College. I did Form 6, math, chem, phys, and that's a fantastic foundation for you to start, doing the sciences. I would say if I could go back in time, I would go do computer science, right? Just that's one of the new skills, in my opinion, of the future. And if you kind of look at this timeline, in 2010, I had no idea how to program. If I looked at a piece of code, that was it. I didn't know what to do. In 2012, I started doing machine learning. I met my advisor. And one of the things that I'm going to pose to each of you is getting mentorship is extremely important for your machine learning data science journey, right? I decided to do a PhD, right? That's one of the ways that you get permanent residence in the US. That was a big motivator for me. I didn't necessarily like school very much. Still don't really like school very much, just because I learn very differently. And from there, I went to work for a transportation company called Alstom. It's a French billion-dollar railroad company. So I learned a lot about the railroads there for 2 years. And now I work for what's called enterprise search company, LucidWorks. And imagine, you type in a search on Google, and they always kind of seem to know what it is you're thinking, what it is you last searched, and how to find the best results. That's essentially what we do. We use machine learning on your own data to help you find the best results that you have. Okay, if that makes sense. So this presentation, like I said, is going to be quick, but I wanted to give you some guiding thoughts and best practices for you to try to be the best data scientist you can be. If you are in high school, like Mandela was just saying, Form 5, Form 6, I want you to get started today. You're in Form 3, I want you to start coding today. So I'll send you a link to a Slack group that I have with some other high school folks as well, folks from India. So you get to meet people from all around the world, and we just, we share mentorship and sort of advice. What is the job of a data scientist? Very simple. You have to deliver measurable value by solving some impactful problem using data. That's it, right? And all of the other algorithms and everything else, they're just details. So when you go down this path, be very, very focused on solving problems, not only specifically learning different types of algorithms. And anyone can find problems around them every day. I would say this is the most important skill for your future, right? Especially now as you cross domains and education. Work with any types of data. I used to work with image data. Now I work with now I work with text data. I've worked on time series data. It doesn't matter. You come in, you understand the fundamentals, and you're able to adapt very quickly to solve new problems. I won't sort of read the rest that's here. Okay. When you get started, read more papers. I've met Ian Goodfellow and this other guy named Peter Abeel, very prominent researchers in the machine learning community, and this was their advice, right? I would say not every good paper is good. Publishing is a game. People publish to keep their jobs, right? So they just have to put out papers, otherwise they get fired. So you have to kind of filter through what's the best and what's not so good. And books are fantastic, but it'll just give you more foundation. If you want to keep up with the field, keep reading, right? But at the end of the day, start coding more than you read. Clean code, write comments, help other people to understand your code, right? In a production environment, you write less comments because people are more familiar with our code base, but in open source projects or learning, feel free to write a lot of comments. And if you come upon a new code base, actually go try to comment it in English or whatever language you use to actually understand the code base step by step and be able to explain it to like a 5-year-old. These are the steps that it takes to solve this particular problem. During your machine learning journey, you'll always have to solve some kind of weird issue, look up some snippet of code in Python or something. Keep those around and share it. Those always help, right? Because you're always going back on the internet to figure out how to iterate through something or do some trick with a list in Python. Know the math, right? A lot of machine learning right now is driven by really good software APIs. At some point, you will have to extend those. And that will require your understanding the math behind those algorithms in addition to how they're implemented. So the more you can do that, the more you can extend, the greater number of problems you can solve. Let's keep moving. This is very important when you go to get a job. I think now that I'm on the hiring side, you look at candidates differently. So a lot of people go through data science boot camps and they'll do the cookie cutter projects and then put those on their GitHub. My opinion is do not put those. If that's the only thing you have in your GitHub, you're telling me that, hey, that's all you've done and you're just following instruction. You're not necessarily extending your thinking and pushing the bounds of your mind. You guys have worked with Google Colab notebooks. Put those on your GitHub. That's kind of nice. Someone clicks a link, they get sent to Google Colab. It makes you look a lot better in an interview. The deep learning, like now, Mandela's already got me on that path. And my previous job interviews, a lot of them I had failed because I didn't have deep learning knowledge, right? That wasn't a focus during my PhD. So I can confidently tell you, hey, that's one of the new skills that people want to pay for. Doesn't solve everything, but it's good. It's good to know and it's good to be able to leverage. This is the new one that's coming up, right? You can go through an entire data science bootcamp. I haven't seen any educational institution focus on model deployment. There's this thing called machine learning ops. And what that's going to give you is the ability to put models into production and make them useful, right? So learn about things like Docker, check out this thing called Cell and Core and MLflow. These are the new skills that data scientists will need in the future, not just the algorithms, because oftentimes you're on a very small team. You don't have lots of resources like in bigger companies. Start working in the cloud, right? Sign up for Google Cloud Platform. They give you like $300 for free. Learn to push data to and from remote repositories, working on cloud instances, and just learn the Linux command line. That's very straightforward. You can learn it in a weekend, and it gives you a lot of confidence to work on remote servers. Okay, keep moving quickly. Yeah, be as technical as possible. This is very, very simple. I have non-technical folks who tend to get fired first, right? So in the COVID realm, this is very important for you to have that skill. But ultimately, if you can speak to people and you have the technical, the career path is very good for you. And that's one of the reasons why I shine at my job. I'm very good with customers. I am responsible for all of the machine learning implementations of our platform across the world. And I have to interface with customers daily. But I also have to speak extremely technically. I have to do the work myself. So doing that full spectrum is very important. Should you get a PhD or not? Here's some advice, right? Your success will depend on your advisor, right? If you have a very famous advisor, you now become like a celebrity as well because of your association. In addition, make sure you work well with them because they'll determine a lot of your life, and get in and get out very quickly. That's my advice. A PhD is a license to learn, okay? Help your advisor do his research so that way you graduate faster and then you could go do whatever it is that you want and you have the letters behind your name. How to get a PhD? Very quickly, you find an advisor, you choose an area, you start researching from day one. That's like the first thing I mentioned to Mandela, start writing from day one. I don't know if you did it. You finish some classes, you pass this thing called a qualifying exam. That's like, how much stuff do you know? You pass your proposal. This is my research. Typically, you're about 70% done by that time. And then you pass this defense where they just tear you down, but you get entry into the PhD club, and then you finish and submit your document. So that's what it looks like at an overview. When you go to work, this is a rule that I follow personally. Someone told me this a long time ago. You should be earning the company that you're working for 10 times your salary. If you're not doing that, do some more work or figure out how to have that type of impact, because it'll just push you to become, in this case, a much better data scientist and be able to communicate that value to your upper management. This is a very important one for me. Even though I have a PhD, I would talk to any one of you as if I did not have a degree, okay? And sometimes you find folks that are very educated, very talented, they kind of look down on you, and that's very debilitating for helping others to progress their career. So no matter how good you are, please meet people where they are and give them that respect. Be very energetic. When you come in a room, do you suck energy out of the room or do you add energy to the room? Do people enjoy being in your presence? That's very important for your career. And just learn to listen to people and hear what they have to say. We're almost done here. Study sales. Everyone is selling. Everything that you have has been gotten by money from your parents' salary or you working. All of that involves selling. And if you can sell and do technical stuff, do machine learning, the world is your oyster. Network. Please don't try to connect with someone on LinkedIn. Just follow them. You have to earn someone's connection. You have to earn entry into a network. So just keep that in mind. And all of my jobs came from networking. I failed a lot in interviews, but most of the ones that I applied and got into, I failed. But the ones that I networked, I got into. So that's just a extra data point. Like I said, when you're on LinkedIn, follow someone, don't connect, share their stuff, help them to build their brand. And once they respond favorably, then you connect. You've earned that connection and it'll sort of pay off. This is one that's very simple. Just work very hard. Work on yourself, right? Here's another point. You might need to start a company. Go join a high growth startup and help to understand how to build $1 billion company. There's lots of things that go on in there and you won't have to pay for those mistakes. You let someone else pay for it, but you're learning as well as you go to build your own company. Please just dress very sharp. I know we're not seeing anyone right now, but when you're in front of a customer, your boss, just be, chopped up and exercise because you're going to be studying a lot. It just takes time. Lastly, this is my last slide. So connect with me on LinkedIn, right? I'm going to post a link to a Slack group that I call Machine Learning Progress Guaranteed. And its simple intention is just to, I probably should stop sharing now, but it's okay. Just to connect with everyone and make sure you're getting the advice that you need, right? This is not a closed group. It's open to everyone. So, okay, I'll pause for questions. Hopefully
that was great, Mark. Any questions, folks? Here's a few more minutes. People appreciate your haircut and your presentation.
That's good.
Yep, then you just posted the link in the Slack. Sweet. So I think any parting advice? I think everyone just loved your presentation, and I think it's a very, very, very great document.
So I think the main thing you want to focus on as you begin, if you give me a minute and a half, as you go down this road, knowing as many people, I think if I had known myself, yourself at a young age in Trinidad, the trajectory that we are on right now would be like light years ahead. So use us as resources for you to actually progress your career a lot faster and a lot further. In addition, focus on a specific area of data science or machine learning, but also look at other data modalities so you're able to just hop across, change careers, solve different types of problems. And yeah, get as much coding under your belt as you can. Try to add value to people. Work for free a lot. That helps, right? I've volunteered a lot and that has opened many doors for me. So don't be afraid to work for free.
Sweet. Now, thanks so much, Mark. Really appreciate it. And if anyone has questions, you can probably post in the chat, and you can probably follow up if he has some time.
All right, perfect. You'll have a great day.
All right. Appreciate you, Mark. Bye. Have a good one. Now I'm excited to welcome Kwame Dr. Johnson. Most people here are doctors, by the way. I should be a little more respectful to their title. But yes, Kwame has this super fascinating story. Started in sort of the medical domain, made the switch to coding and AI. Spent some time at Microsoft and Google, and is now at a exciting startup. And I would leave him to sort of like share more. Welcome, Kwame.
Cool. Thanks, Mandela. It's always interesting to follow Dr. Moyu. Mark is always please listen to Mark. Like he's super good at like catching all of the different pockets of things you need to be thinking about to set yourself up for like tremendous success. So I always like listening to Mark as well because it's just good reminders. But yeah, so I'm Kwame. It's always weird to be referred to as a doctor. I have an MD. I went to Duke Med, but I've never practiced as a doctor, so it always feels kind of weird. Um, but yeah, just as Mandela outlined, essentially I started off with an aspiration to become a neurosurgeon. And so growing up in Trinidad, my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and I was very much inspired to understand the brain and then go into clinical practice to help brain injury and different types of brain diseases. And so eventually I was like inspired by Ben Carson and a bunch of other types of young scientists, neurosurgeons, and eventually went to medicine, moved to the US, studied at Morehouse for undergrad, and got into Duke Med. And went through a bit of a crisis. And there were a couple of things that happened in med school that pushed me away from the typical clinical practice domain. And one was taking care of neurological patients was pretty frustrating because there's nothing that we actually do for brain injury itself. Even to this day, I graduated from med school like 12 years ago. And to this day, if you have a spinal cord injury or any type of like you got a gunshot wound to the head or any type of brain or nervous system injury, there's nothing you actually do for it. You stabilize the other organs and you basically tell the family, we have to hope and see what happens. And so that was pretty frustrating. And I was like, neurosurgery is 7 years of training after medical school. And I didn't really want to spend as much time to then sit down in front of patients and not be able to offer them actual help. So that was the first thing that happened. And the second thing that happened, I started to get involved in the entrepreneurship activities at Duke, particularly in the healthcare track. And so Duke has a startup challenge, it's the elevator pitch business plan competition. And I ran the life sciences and healthcare track of that competition. So I got to see companies coming out of the medical school, companies coming out of the biomedical engineering department using technology to actually advance the edge of what's possible in medicine. And so those two things, the frustration of regular clinical training and then actually seeing what was possible through technology and entrepreneurship is what sort of transitioned me to not really consider proper or traditional clinical practice. So in any case, long story short, I did a bunch of different things, did clinical research, basic science research, tried a whole bunch of different things to understand various aspects of healthcare that you're not typically exposed to as a medical student. And eventually realized that technology was really what I needed to add to my background and to add to my skill set to then be able to contribute to what the next advances in medicine is going to be. So essentially a few years ago, I started to understand how algorithms and artificial intelligence and machine learning was starting to impact clinical practice. Algorithms were starting to be able to do things that doctors couldn't do. I remember reading a paper about a team in England that had developed an algorithm. And this algorithm was able to listen to two teenagers speak for 15 minutes, analyze that conversation, and then predict with something like 90% accuracy which one of those teenagers would have a psychotic break 5 years in the future. If a psychiatrist, a top psychiatrist in the world, they would basically be able to guess that at 50%, 50-50. So I started to really see what artificial intelligence and machine learning and technology was able to do in terms of diagnostic capabilities in medicine. And that is when I decided to essentially quit my job as a medical editor, which is what I was doing for about 5 years at that time. I went to Seattle, did a coding bootcamp, became a software engineer. And as Mandela mentioned, I ended up at Microsoft, which is where I sort of started my tech career. It was not in healthcare there, but I was working as a product manager, really learning how to build technology products. And I knew that with that expertise combined with my medical background, that companies such as Google Health, DeepMind, which is who I was recruited to, would come knocking because they really need that sort of mix of skill sets between the clinical space and the technology space. And so I was recruited to Google. I was at Google Health building tools that are related to medical search for about a couple of years. And about 5 months ago, I transitioned out of Google and I'm now here at AliveCore, which is a cardiovascular startup in Silicon Valley. And essentially, most of us know about the Apple Watch and that the Apple Watch could record an EKG. And so AliveCore was the company that first developed that technology. So it's the first company that was able to develop ambulatory or remote EKG. So anywhere in the world, it's a tiny device. And I actually have it here, but I should be doing better at promoting my company. But anyway, it's a very small device and you're able to take an EKG. So you can Google it. It's called AliveCore is the name of the company, ALIVECOR. And one of the reasons why I made that transition was because with respect to healthcare, healthcare is changing rapidly with technology. And AliveCore is leading that sort of edge because our technology allows EKGs, which is basically the heart rate that you can get, the electrical signal that you can get. And typically those signals are gotten in the hospital with a big machine that you have to wheel into the room and attach electrodes, 12 electrodes to the body. That's a traditional EKG. Whereas with AliveCore, we essentially developed a technology that is much smaller, that allows, remote EKG with a very, very tiny device. It's basically smaller than a credit card, and I don't have it with me. In any case, and so part of what we do with those EKGs is that when a patient or somebody takes an EKG, they're sitting in their house, they feel some sort of palpitation, they record an EKG, it takes 30 seconds. And there are algorithms that analyze that EKG and provide initial diagnoses. And so that's critically important with cardiovascular health, because if somebody's having a cardiovascular event, you want to be able to pick that up very quickly so that you could potentially escalate the care of the patient. And so that's a sort of a synopsis of sort of my story, how I ended up where I am, and in general, kind of some of the things that I do. So currently I'm a lead product manager at AliveCore, and I own basically all the products that doctors would use related to the technology that we have. And so our company has a clinical arm, which is where I live. And then we also have a very robust consumer arm, which is where the medical devices and the app and we have almost 1 million users recording, essentially recording these EKGs throughout, and we collect the data. So that's sort of a synopsis. I assume that's okay for now, and I'll probably open up to questions. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Questions, so I could answer questions about sort of career, about medicine, about artificial intelligence, what I do, any other questions you might want to ask.
So yeah, I'll ask one question and I'll take it to the audience. Can you talk about sort of the differences between, say, like big company and startup people might be interested in, sort of, and then sort of what pushed you in that direction?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And so for context, like I mentioned, I started my tech career at Microsoft. I was there for about a couple of years, and then I transitioned to Google, and I was there for about a couple of years, and now I've been at this small startup for about 6 months. So Google has, I think when I joined, I was employee number 94,000 something, and this was September of 2018. So I was employee 94,000 something. Currently, Google has, I think, 130,000 employees. So that's just to tell you how big Google is, but also how fast it's growing. So in 2 years, it's pretty much added almost 40,000 employees. I calculated Google was hiring about 1,000 employees a week for the time that I was there. And transition that to the company I'm at now, which is about 70 people. So it's very different in many ways. Some in good ways, some in bad ways. I think for me, some of the big differences is obviously the structure. If you have a very big company, you have a lot of processes involved. People tend to be hired for very specific roles. There isn't much overlap. Whereas when you're at a smaller startup, there's not many people. So sometimes there's tasks that may fall onto other people. So you tend to have a lot more versatility in the types of things that you can get involved with. So that's one really major difference. I think in terms of the skill set that's required, and in terms of where the boundaries are, in terms of what job you might be hired for, tends to be a little bit more siloed or restricted or predetermined when you join a very big company. Whereas if you join a very small company, there's oftentimes the opportunity to bleed into other tasks, other skill sets, other domains within the company. That's definitely one big difference. I think, other differences are a little bit more obvious, of resources. Obviously, Google and the big companies would have more money, more resources, more employee benefits. We don't have necessarily free food at the startup that we have, whereas at Google, that's kind of a thing. So like just general resources that you have access to is a difference. Culturally tends to be very different. Obviously, a small team, small company, you have less people, so it's just a lot of the differences are kind of obvious, but from a tech development standpoint, I think the differences are less important. I feel like once you have the skill set and you have access to the technology, which is how it is today, pretty much, apart from when you get into like really esoteric, techniques and technologies that you need, like really massive compute power for, or those types of things where smaller companies may not necessarily be able to compete with larger companies. In general, it's pretty much the same in terms of the work that's being done, the processes, the skill sets, because in a lot of ways as well, the people actually come from both places. So I was at Microsoft and Google, and now I'm at a startup. So I'm bringing those processes to the startup. And so in general, the way we work is pretty much the same. We use the same tools, you know, so like there's not that much difference from a day-to-day standpoint. I think the differences are, the similarities are more numerous than the actual differences between a small company and a startup.
Sweet. There are a lot of questions. So people are curious about after the the sort of EKG stuff tests that you all do. How do people get help, or like does it involve a helpline? So what does that process look like?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and that's a very good product question, because obviously the technology is one thing, and you know, you can develop the best technology, but if it's not actually solving a problem or helping somebody with something they want to do, what is the point? So essentially, the way the technology works, the device is paired to an app, and so when you record the EKG, you actually see the EKG on your phone. And then once that data is captured, you could do a ton of different things with it. You could actually send that EKG to a doctor. We are working on you could send it to a care team, you could send it to your loved ones. We are working on a whole bunch of different tools to enhance what those offerings are from that EKG. So for example, there's a subscription service that would allow you to have your EKGs basically looked at by a cardiologist. There's options with respect to telehealth, where if the algorithm says, hey, based on what we're seeing here, is this possible AFib, which is a disease, a arrhythmia disease called atrial fibrillation, or AFib, the algorithm can actually detect that, and that's a potentially life-threatening condition. So the algorithm would spit out, hey, possible AFib, and then you have options what you want to do there. You could actually escalate the care. We are working on various plugins and different aspects of basically being able to connect and speak directly to a cardiologist about the EKG result. And there's a host of other things that we can do with respect to that pipeline in terms of the communication between the private provider team or the doctors and the patient, as well as a ton of other algorithms we could start to run to look at how one EKG is different from the previous EKG, as well as how your EKG would progress over time. We could look into things like prognosis, what's going to happen over time. There's a lot of different things that could happen once you capture that EKG, have it in the cloud essentially, and have the algorithms running on top of the data.
And then people are also fascinated about how do you sort of make the transition from, say, medicine to tech, or if you're also, or how can you integrate sort of, say, like a tech education into your medical degree, say in an undergrad, or say in a med school?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It wasn't easy. It definitely wasn't easy. The transition from where I was going into what I'm doing now was extremely difficult. And looking back, everybody, when I tell the story, is like, wow, that's such a cool story, and wow, you're like doing all these different things. And looking back, kind of as Steve Jobs said, you know, when you look back, you could kind of connect the dots. Whereas going through it, it was essentially, I was basically trying to trust what I was feeling. And that sounds super kind of wishy-washy and a little bit woo-woo. But essentially, when I was in medical school and I started to contemplate, I was always into neurosurgery. I mean, I was insane. Went to Morehouse. I was always gung-ho, neurosurgery. And the things that allowed me to transition was simply, like I said, trusting my feelings and really being clear and open about what I was actually feeling. I was at Duke Med, one of the top med schools in the country, and I was not happy. Like everybody else, all my classmates wanted to do clinical medicine. I was looking, I was like, wow, we're going to do all of this training, and then you can't actually help patients. We are literally learning what all doctors know. So there was no aspect of the future of medicine and what was really going to be possible in medicine. And so for me, that is where I started to focus. I was seeing what was happening, patients coming in suffering, and doctors have nothing to offer. So that was the impetus. I was like, okay, so for the entire my career, I was focusing on what skills do I need to develop to be able to contribute to the advancing edge of medicine. So I was able to distill down my entire career progression into one essential goal. I knew it's something like dementia. And like I said, I saw my grandmother suffer through dementia. And interestingly, my mother is also suffering with it. So I'm also thinking about it from my personal standpoint. So I knew that I wanted to be working on what is possible in medicine, because like with respect to Alzheimer's, today, there is no cure. And we've been studying Alzheimer's for 50, 60 years. And so it's bringing the latest technology to try to solve those problems that motivated me, and that directed every single thing else that I do and that I did. And I could get into the specifics of the exact things that I tried. Like I said, I tried a lot of different things. Like my career was all over the place, and it was only with developing the different pieces of skills that I knew when combined is going to produce the type of mix of skills that allows me to do what I do today. So what I do today is actually think about what problems doctors are trying to solve for patients today that they cannot solve, and then think about how to leverage the best of technology to allow them to solve those problems. And that goal or that purpose requires a ton of different types of skills. I need to know medicine very well. I need to know the healthcare industry very well, how that's changing. I need to know technology very well and how that applies to healthcare. I need to know data and data science because that drives everything that we do. I need to know how to speak and how to tell the story. I need to know how to write well and communicate what I'm doing. So all of those different things. I need to know business. So if you look at my LinkedIn, you would actually see the progression of all those different things that I did. And so now today, when I get into a room and there's a room with a VP of sales and a chief technology officer and a CEO, I could actually have conversations with each one of those people because I know what is important to those different domains. And that is the essential skill of product management. We sit at the intersection of all of the different domains: design, data science, business, marketing, sales. And we are the engine that pulls all of those things together to drive the success of the product. So every app that you have, every feature, every new feature in WhatsApp or Instagram that you see, that was built by a product manager who managed an entire team. And so for me, I knew that I wanted to build products and I need a lot of different skills. So that is the sort of approach I took to my career. And just one last plug on that story. I read a book when I was in med school called So Great They Can't Ignore You. It's by a guy called Cal Newport. And one of the things he talks about in that book is that passion and this whole advice about just follow your passion is actually bad advice. And the thing that you should be actually looking for in your career and pursuing in your career is the acquisition of skills, and focus on that. You have a job, it's not about anything else but the skills that you can develop that will then allow you to combine with other skills to deliver value to a company or to a purpose. And so when Google or Facebook or any of these companies look at me, they're looking at the skills that I've developed. And so focus on skill development as opposed, and obviously passion on what you like should involve what skills you develop, but the focus is on the skills and what you can actually deliver. And so as Mark said, you should be making the company 10 times your salary. How do you do that? You have to apply actual skills. And so this course as well is helping develop skills, and that is the critical thing. Okay, that's a long explanation to that.
No, that was super powerful. I think everyone really appreciated that answer for sure. I think to end off, I'm curious about how has sort of COVID affected your company either in a positive or negative direction, or how have you all been able to adapt given the sort of circumstances?
That is such an excellent question. So interestingly, I started at this company on March 2nd, and I believe the lockdown in California was announced 2 weeks after that. So looking at it, okay, and then like the company like I work at, like I said, we do remote patient care. So currently, nobody wants to go to the hospital. So there's actually data that shows that over COVID so far, heart attacks have gone down. How is that possible? What is happening? People are actually staying at home and dying and not going to the hospital because they don't want to be exposed to COVID. So that scenario has elevated the value of any technology that could allow a patient to send physiological data to a doctor or to a hospital without going to the hospital. So remote patient care is the space that we live in, that I'm working in. So we're building technology tools where no matter where a person is, in the middle of the Sahara, in the Amazon jungle, once you have any connection to the internet or to the cloud, we could allow a doctor to take care of you. And so with COVID, that opportunity and that aspect of healthcare, that aspect of business, that aspect of the entire economic situation, all companies in that space are doing very well. You've seen the valuation of a company called Livongo and Teladoc, which is telehealth. And Livongo is another company that's basically chronic disease management, basically remotely using technology. So COVID has elevated the opportunities in this aspect of healthcare. You see it with Trump was announcing with the Medicare changes to improve the access of people living in remote areas to healthcare using telehealth and different types of technologies. to reduce the barrier to access to care. And overall, COVID has really accelerated that need. And so it almost looks like my decision to leave Google when I did was impeccable timing. But obviously it was a happy accident. And so, yeah, so the company, we're doing very well. And most companies in this space, typically, at least we have a lot of demand, and it's almost like sharks in the water, really like figuring out quickly, trying to figure out where to really differentiate. And luckily, we've been around a long time for a startup. I think we're 7 or 8 years old. And so we have an established technology. We are the #1 mobile EKG on the planet. It's very accurate. It's FDA approved. And so because of that, we're able to leverage that technology now, and we're building services around it, leveraging AI. And it's kind of insane the type of things that AI could actually pull out from just an EKG. And it's just a waveform, and you could detect all types of stuff from it. And obviously with things like predictive algorithms, eventually the holy grail is to be able to take an EKG, one EKG, 30 seconds, and be able to say, hey, in 5 years, you have a 70% chance of developing X. Some blood parameter that we cannot measure today without taking out your blood, we could detect that in an EKG. All these different kind of really cool, interesting things are possible with that. And COVID is simply just accelerating the need for this type of technology.
Wow. That was, yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And any parting words? I think there's a bunch of questions. If you have some time, you could follow up on the chat, but any sort of parting words to share to the audience? They really enjoyed sort of like what you shared today.
So yeah, definitely. I mean, I love talking about technology. I love talking about healthcare. I love people who are interested in it. So feel free to reach out. Find me on LinkedIn. So if you just Google Kwame Johnson Duke, I think I'm the only one. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you want to chat, reach out. I'm going to be setting up a calendar, so you could actually access my calendar and grab 30 minutes if you want to chat with me about anything. Again, I love encouraging people into technology, and I'm super passionate about this. I'm also working on building a couple of startups at the moment. So I'm also looking for people who are really interested in just learning and getting into this and actually delivering value. And one of the things that I say, I think anybody who's not in tech, please come into tech. And if you're in tech, please consider healthcare technology. Because at the end of the day, it's one thing to stay up 2 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out a bug in a program, and the goal is to get somebody to download an app. It's another thing to stay up 2 o'clock in the morning, and the goal is to help somebody not have a heart attack, or to help somebody actually save their loved one. So I'm encouraging everybody in this call, if you haven't even considered, I know everybody is interested in artificial intelligence and technology. If you haven't considered healthcare technology, please look into it. It is a massive industry, and it is expanding probably faster than any other aspect of the healthcare space right now, because of what's happening with COVID and because of what's happening in the need for additional technologies to be able to take care of patients and gather clinical information and deliver healthcare from anywhere on the planet. And again, with the advancing on 5G and all of these different technologies, the advances in healthcare technology between 2020 and 2030 is going to simply blow people's minds, because we've been working in it for a long time, and a lot of the technologies are starting to get really ripe. You're seeing what the big tech companies are doing. Google is in health, Microsoft is in health, Apple is in health, Facebook is in health, everybody's in health. And so everybody's recognizing. One of the important things I noticed at Google Health when I was there, I was very curious, why is Google going into health? And Google Health started in 2019. It is because when you compare the size of the ad business and you compare that to the size of the healthcare industry, it's dwarfed. I think the healthcare industry is trillions of dollars. And so all of these big tech companies are realizing the value in the space. So they're all just converging. So again, that's a plug. Anybody interested, please look into healthcare technology. It is incredible, the types of things that we're doing. And I could talk about it for hours. The stuff I saw at Google in terms of what's possible with a camera. There are cameras that could, literally this camera on your laptop right now, there's technology that it could actually tell what's your heart rate, what's your blood pressure, what's your respiratory rate, just while we're talking right now. That's just one example of the insane types of healthcare technologies applying artificial intelligence and all the different aspects of cutting edge technologies. And don't even get me started on the promise of quantum computing and all of those different really super futuristic things that will actually make some of the most amazing aspects of what we think is possible in medicine would actually make it possible.
Wow. with those words, I just want to say thank you so much, Kwame. Really
Definitely.
inspiring. Not for taking the time, and there are people want the contact information or some
Mhm.
questions. If you have some time, feel free to just pop into the chat and
Yeah,
and
I'll drop my LinkedIn in the chat. That'll be the
perfect,
easiest thing. That's the easiest way to find me.
sweet. Thank you so much, Kwame. Really
Definitely,
appreciate it.
anytime. Yep.
Uh, and now I would like to sort of introduce Jeff. He's been here all week. I met him a few years ago. When I interned at Facebook in California. Welcome me into the Bay Area, and has been a mentor ever since. Also is going to talk about healthcare as well, impact of AI in healthcare, and I'm super excited for him to share what he's been up to.
All right, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, your volume could go up a little bit, but we can hear you.
All right, I'll try to get closer to the mic. Is that better?
A little better.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Well, thanks. It's an honor to be here. Mandela, thank you for officially considering me one of your mentors. I think the honor goes both ways. I have to say, I've been waiting 20 years for the groundswell.
Volume is low, is
Volume
soft.
is low?
Yeah.
Let me try to turn this up 1 second. How is the volume now if I do this?
Better.
All right. Sorry about that. Thank you very much. Is this too loud? Is good?
Good. Everyone's happy. Yes.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, tech conferences, they always go in the opposite direction. So Mandela, thank you for the intro. It's been 20 years since I've been waiting for a groundswell like this. Congrats to you for pulling this together. And I have to say congrats to the 500 plus people that registered, and it's day 5. Impressively, the people who are on this still, kudos to you. This is not easy stuff. I know some of you guys showed up and on the first day went, what the hell did I get myself into? So congrats on sticking it out and even making it to this point. But this is just the start, and I'm very excited that all of you are here. But I'm more excited that there's such a groundswell of people affiliated with Trinidad are interested in this field. I want to actually take over from where Kwame left off. I'll talk a little bit about companies like Teladoc and Levant company we built, so that you understand why that's relevant to you trying to do here. But I think it's most important that we first understand that the kind of journey that we have is a journey that we can share, right? I saw a lot of questions I've been following on and off for the last few days. I know there's people from the high school level. I know there's people who are early into their careers. I also know that there's some mid-stage professionals, and that's fantastic. I'm into this stuff, probably not as much of an expert as Mandela is, but I will tell you, despite the fact that I've kind of gone on to the point where, Mandela is mentoring you guys and I'm mentoring Mandela, and at some point we hope that Mandela will be exposed to the types of things that I have been in my career, and you guys will be exposed to some of the things that he has and I have. I think at the end of the day, the important thing is what you're doing right now is the future of not just technology, but what companies are going to be based upon. And let me say that again. What you're doing now is so fundamental. This is going to be the equivalent of when I sat down at MIT with Sir Tim Berners-Lee in the 90s, and we had to hand code a web server every single time we launched a website. That's where things were. So you think this is a lot of hand coding to go and download your data and build a model and then put it up, do the training. That's pretty much where the field always starts. But the fact that all of you guys are in at this stage is absolutely fantastic. So let me start with the end, because I think it's important for us to understand what I'm hoping you could get out of the time here. And I'm happy to share contact information. I actually sent it to Mandela. He could send it out at the end of this. But what I've been involved in for the last 20 years is at the intersection of what Kwame just talked about, what we call now digital health and artificial intelligence. digital health is the disruption, just like Google was a disruption to all industries because of search and the internet and the web. What is happening right now is we have a disruption, and COVID, to just build on the point that the question Mandela asked, COVID has actually accelerated where things are going, probably in some cases 2 years, 3 years, and in other cases 10 years. The things that are happening today at the intersection of healthcare and AI are the things that are probably going to drive all of the industries moving forward: financial services, automobile, industrial, consumer, technology, you name it. Everything is going to get driven from fields like what's happening today. And usually healthcare is the back of the pack, right? In fact, in the United States of America, I'm, by the way, talking to you guys from Silicon Valley. I'm 4 minutes from Google, about 11 minutes from Facebook, 10 minutes from Apple's headquarters. But the reality of it is that these industries are being shifted by these big tech companies. But healthcare itself is a whole different industry vertical, which I actually don't see Google, Facebook, Microsoft, any of these companies actually building the next Google around. So the question is, where is that going to come from? So I've been very, very privileged to be exposed to contributing to and building a company such as Livongo. We came out here. We actually had a company that was based in Trinidad. Some of you guys may have heard of Medullin. We took the commercial arm of what we built for Medullin and we brought it to Livongo. What we were able to do with that is enable Livongo to grow as one of the fastest technology companies treating the massive $1 trillion diabetes space in the US. We got them into the health plans. The health plans are the ones that are the insurance companies that reimburse. And it's not cheap. It's $1,000 that you have to pay for this solution. So it can't come out of pocket from the consumer. It has to come from an insurance company. And AI is just the tip of the iceberg. So I'm going to talk a lot about that type of stuff. But, I think, Mandela, you want me to cover a bit of background as well, right? So folks know my journey as a Trinidadian. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, you all will look at my LinkedIn and whatnot, and there's MIT and Harvard. I'll give you the short version. I went to MIT for the important stuff, which was computer science, which I love. I went to Harvard for the easy stuff, which is this. The journey for me, however, was, most people don't know this about me. I dropped out of school when I was 10 and went and worked in a grocery store because I just was bored in primary school. I had plenty of problems in primary school. I had to go to 4 different primary schools. The teacher would give me all kind of hell. I eventually just dropped out. And the only reason I ended up finishing primary school was because the teacher come and say, you either go back to school or you're going to go to jail. That's the only reason. We had to go to school. It was the law. So despite working 72 hours a week, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day in a grocery store, I begrudgingly put down my first job and I went back to school. Went to Fatima because that's where the computer lab was. For those of you who are at the A-level, because I saw a lot of people who are at the A-level level and a little bit beyond, for mock exams, I got, I think, an E in computer science. They scratched me off the list because I got in Fatima, if you get a B in maths, you're done. So hard luck, you're not on the scholarship list. And I think I got a C in physics or something like that. But somehow to get myself by cycle to MIT, and a lot of the rest of the story happened from there. So I don't want to spend time talking about the journey, but there's a lot that I can share with you in terms of why AI, why technology, where you guys can go. There were fantastic talks from everyone before me, from Kwame. I really love what Mark was sharing in terms of practical advice. What I'm hoping that I can share, and I want to really focus on the questions you might have, is really around what happens after you go off there and you do well in your first job. What happens after you get promoted and you become a manager? What happens after you end up managing 200 people and a quarter of a whole office? What happens after you decide after your first degree, you want to do a second degree, PhD, business degree? What happens after then you now start to build and invest in companies? What happens when you start to do all of these other things where you know, you guys will probably figure this out as you do your math. I figure out everybody here is technically literate. When you get to a certain level of wealth, and wealth is not going to come from, in my opinion, working for Google or Microsoft or Facebook. You have a nice job, you have a nice experience, and you check a box and you make Zuckerberg an extra billion. But wealth is going to come from you building your own company. And I know that's not for everyone, but for those of you who want to aspire to following in the footsteps of like Vijay and some others that have built and sold companies to the likes of Google, and to maybe someday come and see Silicon Valley and be part of the pinnacle of where all of this happens, reach out to me and we can have the conversation. Mandela?
Sweet. So do you want to share a little bit about what you're building at Skin IQ? And then people post questions in the chat.
Right.
People who are interested, and we will sort of go between the two.
All right, let me see. Can you start the screen sharing, or I have to do that here?
You can just click share screen, and you should be able to. You should be able
share
to.
Screen. Okay, got it. As I said, tech people in tech don't know tech. All right. Let's share the desktop. One second, I have to open up sharing. I don't think I will have to quit Zoom. It's not enabled.
Oh, it's not enabled.
Yeah, let me just talk to the slides because I really want to focus on people's questions. So what?
All right.
So we build and we invest in companies. So there was a company like Livongo, just to give you guys one example of the types of things that we have been involved in. When I came out here to Silicon Valley 5 years ago, Livongo was a concept business. They put $10 million worth of seed capital on it. One of my colleagues from MIT. Right now, he's the largest shareholder of a company that just got a merger offer and is worth $18 billion. So if you do the math and figure out he put 10 million in, now he has a quarter of 18 billion, you'll get a sense of the kind of wealth that's built in this space. So we are building companies like Livongo. One example that Mandela wants me to talk to is Skin IQ. Okay, so for Skin IQ, what we have is a convolutional neural network that has to run potentially on a server, but more importantly, it has to look at the face of teenagers, young professionals who have acne, who have other types of skin disease, and classify what kind of acne you have. And all of the things you guys have been covering, convolutional neural networks, it's not as directly related to the types of data sets you've been working with, but a lot of the concepts are what we have to apply in order to figure out is what kind of pimple is it? Is it on the cheek? Is it inflamed? Is it ruptured? Is it just a comedone? Is it going to become a pimple? What type of medicine do we need to give to the person? And that's what we use convolutional neural networks for at Skin IQ. More importantly, we not only have to make them predict accurately what types of acne the person has, we have to be able to make the model compact and performant enough that it could run in real-time video on a mobile device at 30 frames per second. So how do you do that? That's all the engineering that goes into it. And I'm happy to connect offline and talk more, share some slides, and chat about that. Sorry that I didn't check that my Zoom was not connected to screen sharing.
You can probably just send the slides to me, and then I could probably share it to the audience
I can't.
after.
It's
oh, yeah.
150 megabytes of video.
Oh, got you. So people are curious about practical experience to sort of augment. How would you recommend getting practical experience to augment sort of the education you get in, say, like a university or PhD degree?
Yeah, so practical experience, definitely thumbs up on that. What you're doing right now is that type of stuff. I saw some questions about MIT. So one of the things people don't know about MIT is that a big part of how you get a computer science degree, or pretty much any engineering degree from a school like MIT, involves what people call work study programs. So for me, I had to be part of an internship program where I worked for 3 summers and then did my thesis, my master's thesis, at a company called Hughes Network Systems. That was instrumental because I got to fill my entire summer of 3 months with very practical experience. During undergrad, there's these research opportunity programs. So if you have a chance of working on the side through a professor with a guy like VJ in Trinidad, that will be fantastic. If you have the chance working remotely for companies that are willing to hire Trinidad in the field of data science, deep learning, artificial intelligence, that is also fantastic. And then even when you have a full-time job, your job, in my humble opinion, is to be reinventing your own job. And the only way you could do that is to continue to learn, do exactly like what Mandela has graciously given up his entire evening in the UK every day this week to share with us. And there's a lot of people that do this content. Some of it is good, some of it sucks, some of it is relatable, some of it is not. I encourage you to consume as much as possible as in whatever free time you have when you're a professional, and just make the most of that.
And people are curious about your first taste of business. Was it a startup? Was it what was your first taste of business like, and how did that sort of influence sort of like your future decisions?
It's a good question. Yeah. So my first job in the US was at a consulting firm called Sapient Corporation. Sapient was one of the fast growth companies in the 90s, and it grew to about 9 billion in 8 years' time. It was one of the few consultancies added to the S&P 500. But luckily for me, one of the clients that we worked for was not a big bank or a big, this and that kind of company. We actually got a startup. We had a startup who was run by a couple of guys from Ernst & Young and IBM that went off and raised $30 million, and they could afford to pay us as consultants to build the startup for them. So my first experience, real true visceral experience, and really knowing that I wanted to build companies, was being in there with those guys, because I know that I was doing things as a Trinidadian in the boardroom, influencing them, influencing the direction of that company, even though I was the lowest rung on the totem pole on the consulting team. And it felt really good to be able to share ideas, technical and otherwise, and be able to influence the direction of a company. Then I learned about P&L, mostly from Yahoo. I got this little MBA degree from this other school that Mandela went to. And then, the rest is just practice. You have to go out there. I started my own company. I started Medullin, and we built it and we grew it. We scaled it up. And that's basically what I do all the time now. But yeah, you gotta decide whether you want to be an entrepreneur. It's not an easy life. And even if you don't feel you have the risk profile necessary to become an entrepreneur, you can get involved in entrepreneurial experiences. And I think these are important ones that I would encourage you to do. Even at a big company that you might work for, you have to be able to test whether they have that entrepreneurial person or entrepreneurial department that will give you the exposure of disrupting everything the company has been doing and giving you the chance to take technologies like deep learning, explore something new, and potentially transform the way the business is working. You'll learn a whole lot leading into that type of stuff.
Sweet. And we have time for some parting words, and then if there's anything we could you could follow up with some questions, with any questions people have in the chat. Any parting words for these young interested people?
Yeah, I mean, I will say one thing that has not probably been said, which is I know Trinidadians have also been following this Black Lives Matter thing. And, just the fact that we have not mentioned it on this course is a testament to who we are as West Indians and Trinidadians. We are able to lead. There are people like Mandela that I know he's proud of being a Black man from Trinidad. I know him very well. I've read his essays that he used to get his scholarship to go to Oxford. And, we are also proud of him. But what matters more than just writing about it and talking about it is doing it, going out there and leading. And every single one of you, whether you're white, you're Black, you're Indian, you're Chinese like me or whatever, I'm not, can't even tell what I am. I can show you my DNA. It doesn't really matter. The fact that we are going out there and leading and taking fields like artificial intelligence and changing the game at the highest level without permission from the people that currently run the system, this is what it's going to take to put ourselves on the map. And no politician can tell us about that. We just have to go out and do it. So that's my part in words, Mandela.
Sweet. Thanks so much, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
All right.
And
Good luck to everyone.
feel free to stay in the chat. Our last speaker for today is someone I've met pretty recently, and has sort of done some amazing things as a technologist, innovator, and is currently one of the top professors at the University of the West Indies. And thought he'd be a fitting end to sort of end this, to sort of give you all a sense of what opportunities are available to sort of pursue this further in Trinidad and beyond. Professor Hussain was also one of Stefan's professors who you all heard about yesterday, who was at Google. And yeah, I'm very excited to have Professor Hussain today to share some of his thoughts, his advice, and sort of answer any questions you all have about pursuing these sort of careers abroad in UWI, etc. Welcome, Professor.
Oh, thanks for having me, Mandela. So, how you want me to start? Background?
Yeah, a little background about yourself, sort of what you were in Trinidad, maybe high school, undergrad, and then sort of like professional career, to give that sort of context. Okay,
well, let me start from the beginning, because where I started, I'm kind of back there right now. I grew up in Curep, went to Curep Presbyterian School. Then I went to St. Mary's, got a scholarship, went to MIT, and spent 10 years there. So I did 5 degrees there at MIT. So I'm, pure MIT. I didn't have any experience from anywhere else, which is unfortunate. MIT actually encourages you to do your graduate, if you do your undergrad there, to go on somewhere else to do your graduate degree. So they rarely accept undergraduates to the graduate program. But anyway, I stayed on, did my degrees, PhD in electrical engineering and computer science. Had to return to Trinidad because of my scholarship, the usual, routine. So I returned to the UWI Electrical Engineering Department, stayed there for like 3 years, started at MSc in Communication Systems, but then decided to go back to the US. I was more interested in research, and so I went, well, just before I went back to UWI, I was at Bell Labs. So after leaving UWI, I went back to Bell Labs, continued doing research in telecommunications, on switching and networking and all that kind of stuff. Then I switched over to AT&T Labs, because that's when they split. And after a while, I figured cellular was becoming popular. So that tells you how old I am. So you probably figure cellular has been around forever. But so I decided to switch to and also we wanted to get out of New Jersey, because we were in New Jersey. I had spent 10 years in Boston. I was fed up of the cold. So was either Florida or California. I had options in both places. We put it to the vote. Family said California. I wanted Florida, but anyway, so we ended up in San Diego. I ended up at Ericsson, doing research in wireless communications. 2G, 3G, 4G. Then switched over to Huawei. Continued doing research on LTE. And some advanced stuff. Then what did I do? I moved back to AT&T briefly, and then I decided, look, I'm contributing to all these companies, and I should really be giving back to Trinidad. So I decided to my kids had grown, so I decided to go back to Trinidad, to UWI, to contribute. And this time I decided to go into the computer science department instead of electrical. I wanted to do something different. So I've been there for the last 9 years or so, trying to, you know, improve the education as well. You know, I started an MSc in data science. I revamped the MSc in computer science, but I'm pushing more along the lines of research, because we do have very bright people. They don't have the opportunity to do research. And Stefan, who you said was on earlier,
Yeah.
is a perfect example. He was actually one of the few people who, as an undergrad, he started doing research with me, and within the first year, he had like 4 publications. One of his publications is highly cited, in fact. And of course, he went on to do great things. So what I try to do is get good students and kind of bring them to the level of doing research at international level. Now that's one thing. So that's geared more to those who want to advance their academic career, go on to do their PhD, etc. abroad, but also focus on practical stuff. So we also try to do more practical type research. And so I have this program with different companies where my postgrad students are interns, and they are, you know, I tell the company straight off, they are not coming there to do trivial stuff. They are coming there to do research type work. They must be able to publish, but they will solve one of your problems. So they solve a practical problem, they gain practical experience, they publish, they get a little stipend to keep them going. And the company benefits because, you know, we've solved a problem for them. So we've done that with companies such as Sagicor and Guardian Life and Beacon and TSTT. Right now at TSTT we have 5 such interns, and TNTech as well. So the interesting thing is we do a wide range of we work on a wide range of topics, because my background, as I said, is in wireless communications, but I kind of shifted more into data science because that's a need right now in Trinidad. So I wanted to do something that's more beneficial to Trinidad, as opposed to wireless communications, which, you know, we basically use stuff that people, vendors provide to us. But we still do stuff. I still, you know, one of my students, for instance, is a research professor in Korea, and I still collaborate with her on wireless communications. We also do a lot of work in operations research, optimization, so optimizing processes, etc. Actually, operations research in one way is sort of like the grandfather of data science, right? It came before data science, the optimization part. So we do some work with our optimization. We do work in data science for different industries, as I said, insurance, banks. Right now we have a grant from FCIB to do work, AI in finance, machine learning in finance. So I have 5 students on that grant, working with people in Barbados on different aspects of applying machine learning to finance. So that's about it. Right now, I am in San Diego. What happened is, you know, with the lockdown, because my family is still in San Diego, I didn't want to be away from them for too long. So I do go back and forth. You know, of course, I go back to Trinidad to teach, but because all classes are online now, I'm back in San Diego. So I'll probably be here until they open the border again. But for those of you participating, and by the way, Mandela, this is fantastic. I mean, what you've done here is great. We need more of this, and I wish I had the energy. You have the energy. I am way past that. I am in chill mode. I basically do research and I do some consulting, but that's about it. So I'm glad to see people like yourself and Stefan and all the others you've had. Some of these people I know, you know, Jeff and I go back in time. So I'm glad to see it, and I believe these students will take advantage of it once they go through the UE system. Even before they go through the UE system, what I believe is a lot of this stuff could be done even without a bachelor's degree. You know, you could go online and learn a lot. In fact, you know, some of my students who've done a bachelor's degree, basically I have to retrain them into, you know, for the topics they need to use to solve some of the problems in industry, because we haven't really captured all, or we don't provide all the training that is needed. But yeah, so thanks again for providing this. And yeah, what else can I?
So yeah, I think people are super curious about, so you mentioned that what sort of offerings are available at UE, and then people who are looking to get sort of more practical experience, do you need to be sort of like, say, the stuff that you're running with Sagicor, etc.? If people have sort of the background, they have the experience, can they get involved in some of these projects through internships if they're not, say, in a degree program at the moment?
Yes, well, I do have people coming to me directly. So, mostly these are returning scholars who are come back as APs, you know, associate professionals. But yeah, you need to have some background in it, because even if it's not directly in data science. So I have people working with me who have backgrounds in electrical engineering, in statistics, math, mechanical engineering, but they have the basic mathematical basics and programming basics to build upon. So what I would normally do is based on their background, I would point them to online courses to take to get to the level where I could then introduce them to internships with companies. But yeah, it would help if you have sort of like a bachelor's degree in some STEM subject. That would help.
Got you.
But a lot of this stuff we do, as I said, is practical. Some is theoretical, but and yeah, I could talk about some of these stuff. You know, some of the recent paper publications, for instance. I don't know if I can share.
Yeah, you should be able to share.
All right, let me. Okay. I thought I had. Let me bring up.
Sweet, yep, you're seeing.
Okay, so yeah, this is just a screenshot. Let me. Yeah, I had something I wanted to show, but I guess I can't bring it up. So let me just bring up the website itself. So I believe you can see this, right?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So yeah, let me just go through some of because this shows how we actually use some of the things you've been teaching over the last few days, right? So of course we can't do the type of research that would be done at Facebook or Google, which is interesting stuff, but we don't have the resources, we don't have access to the data sets to do that level of research. But we do have some interesting work. So for instance, next week, for instance, I'm presenting a talk on the optimal baseline auto insurance premium at a KDD workshop. You probably are familiar with KDD, Mandela, I guess?
Yep, KDD, yes.
So there's a KDD workshop on machine learning and finance. And it's actually It was supposed to be right here in San Diego, which is why it's so
Yeah.
but it turns out now because of COVID, it's completely online. So it doesn't matter that I'm here anyway. But this is based on actual companies in Trinidad. This is looking at price elasticity as a function of demand for insurance companies in Trinidad. All right, basically as a price of a premium goes up, the people move to the competition, so the number of customers you have goes down. So there's a trade-off, and there's an optimal price for in a particular environment, competitive environment. And this is actually looking at 8 insurance companies in Trinidad and using their data, certain data from them, to find the optimal premium that they should be aiming for. So it's interesting to see where some of the insurance companies lie when you actually look at the data. The paper doesn't have the companies themselves; it's anonymized, but it's based on actual local companies. The next one is using topic modeling to correlate a research institution's outputs with its goals. This uses a natural language processing, which you probably covered as well, right?
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
So this came about because we were doing some work a couple of years ago on what journals the library should subscribe to, because the UWI library pays a lot of money on subscriptions. We're talking about millions of dollars on journal subscriptions for the library, electronic subscriptions. And so we use historical data to show how they could reduce the cost and maintain the same level of service by a significant amount. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. But anyway, along the way, while we were doing that work, we were interested in figuring out, well, what research should we be doing at UWI? We should be doing stuff that is relevant to the country. So we wanted to find the correlation between research being performed at UWI and the actual needs of the country in terms of vision of the research, vision of the country. So for instance, if we were doing work on nuclear research in nuclear power, it doesn't really benefit the country. So this actually looks at that correlation, and we found that it's not aligned as much as it should be, but it looks like we are heading in that direction. The next one, well, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the next one is on collecting reliable crowdsourced data. This came about because I wanted to get some information to be able to rank ISP providers, internet providers locally. And so we came up with a specific metric that could be used to rank them, but we needed to be able to collect the data reliably. So we actually developed a platform so that we could ensure that the data provided by individuals was reliable. So this is based on a trust framework where only trusted people are allowed to provide data, etc. The other one on the sizing of security personnel staff overtime pay. This is actually work that UWI asked us to do. So we actually do work for UWI as well. They wanted to optimize their allocation of security personnel in terms of how many to hire, because there's a trade-off between too few people, because if it's too few people, you have to pay a lot in overtime. And if it's too many people, you don't have overtime, but basically you have to give people, because you have to work 40 hours a week, then you have, it's inefficient as well. So this actually optimizes that, and we were able to publish it as well. So for those of you interested, you could go to lab.ttn and get more information about these publications. But I just want to give students an idea that that the fact that the stuff they're learning from you is useful locally as well, and it applies to It may not be high-end Google type research, but we do have interesting problems locally that to be solved using data science.
Got you. So I think we might be running out of time. So I think it'd be good if you could give like a sort of parting words in terms of people who are from Trinidad. They really enjoyed, say, this week's course. What are some good next steps? You said you mentioned some courses. You obviously have a couple master's programs undergrad at UWI. Any sort of parting words of advice to people who want to say, "Go take this further"?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure about the makeup of the students, but I believe it's mostly high school students. So
high school students, maybe some in university, maybe some professionals as well.
So
mix.
you know, learn your mathematics. That is very important. You know, the other stuff, programming, etc. You can learn along the way, but you know, in mathematics, the earlier you learn it, the more confident you become in it, and it easier becomes for you to use it later on in life. So focus on your mathematics. You know, UWI has undergrad programs in computer science. You could take that. There are lots of online programs as well. You know, if you don't want to go through the traditional academic route. Those of you who already have a bachelor's degree, we offer a MSc in data science, but there are also very good online master's programs in data science from several universities like Georgia Tech, etc. MIT has a micro MSc. So it's a lot easier for you to learn stuff and to get experience. You could get experience by you know, taking part in some of these Kaggle competitions or other competitions. And if you're at the point where you really want to do research and solve some real world problems, etc., and you have the background, you know, of course, one thing I ask students to do is to at least take the machine learning course by Andrew Ng, or I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but
yeah, Andrew,
as a basis, so at least I know what they know, and then, you know, we can take it from there.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Professor Hussain, for spending the time. And this sort of wraps up our week-long crash course. Just want to thank everyone for taking the time, being engaged, asking questions, helping each other out. I think this was a wonderful experience for everyone. Thank you so much for BPTT for helping to sponsor this and doing all of the sort of administrative and work needed in the back end to get this stuff to work and be a very seamless experience for everyone. And yes, we probably, so for those who attended most of the courses, we will send out a certificate of completion. We'll also send out some virtual swag sponsored by Facebook, and we'll also share out personal details, email details at least for some of the speakers, for people who want to sort of connect further. But we really appreciate everyone coming along, and as everyone has said, this is just the start. There's so much resources online. Take advantage of everything, help each other out, and sort of, yeah, make an impact on the world, follow your passions. And I thank you. I thank all of the speakers for taking the time. And this was an amazing, amazing week. Thank you so much. All right. Have a good one, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, Mandel.